Communication is a sign of sanity. Therapists calculate inmates of mental institutions say I and me 12 times more often than residents of the outside world. As patients' conditions improve, the number of times they use the personal pronouns also diminishes. Continuing up the sanity scale, the fewer times you use I, the more sane you seem to your listeners. If you eavesdrop on big winners talking with each other, you'll notice a lot more you than I in their conversation. Technique number 28. Communication. Start every appropriate sentence with you. It immediately grabs your listener's attention. It gets a more positive response because it pushes the pride button and saves them having to translate it into me terms. When you sprinkle you as liberally as salt and pepper throughout your conversation, your listeners find it an irresistible spice. The next technique concerns a way big winners are silently you-oriented. 29. How to make them feel you don't smile at just anybody. Have you ever seen those low-budget mail-order fashion catalogs that use the same model throughout? Whether she is engulfed in a wedding gown or partially clad in a bikini, her face sports the same plastic smile. Looking at her, you get the feeling if you rapped on her forehead, a tiny voice would come back saying, "Nobody's in here." Whereas models in more sophisticated magazines have mastered a myriad of different expressions. A flirtatious, "I've got a secret" smile on one page, a quizzical, "I think I'd like to get to know you, but I'm not sure" smile on the next, and a mysterious Mona Lisa smile on the third. You feel there's a brain running the operation somewhere inside that beautiful head. I once stood in the receiving line of the ship I worked on, along with the captain, his wife, and several other officers. One passenger with a radiant smile started shaking hands down our line. When he got to me, he flashed a shimmering smile, revealing teeth as even and white as keys on a new piano. I was transfixed. It was as though a brilliant light had illuminated the dim ballroom. I wished him a happy cruise and resolved to find this charming gentleman later. Then he was introduced to the next person. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his identical glistening grin. A third person, the same grin. My interest began to dwindle. When he gave his fourth indistinguishable smile to the next person, he started to resemble a Cheshire cat. By the time he was introduced to the fifth person, his consistent smile felt like a strobe light disturbing the ambience of the ballroom. Strobe Man went on flashing everybody the same smile down the line. I had no further interest in talking with him. Why did this man's stock shoot high in my ticker 1 minute and plummet the next? Because his smile, although charming, reflected no special reaction to me. Obviously, he gave the same smile to everybody, and by that it lost all its specialness. If Strobe Man had given each of us a slightly different smile, he would have appeared sensitive and insightful. Of course, if his smile had been just a tad bigger for me than for the others, I couldn't have waited for the formalities to be over to seek him out in the crowded ballroom. Review your repertoire of smiles. If your job required you to carry a gun, you would, of course, learn all about the moving parts before firing it. And before taking aim, you would carefully consider whether it would murder, maim, or merely wound your target. Since your smile is one of your biggest communications weapons, learn all about the moving parts and the effect on your target. Set aside 5 minutes. Lock your bedroom or bathroom door so your family doesn't think you've gone off the deep end. Now stand in front of the mirror and flash a few smiles. Discover the subtle differences in your repertoire. Just as you would alternate saying, "Hello, how do you do?" and "I am pleased to meet you," when being introduced to a group of people, vary your smile. Don't use the same on each. Let each of your smiles reflect the nuances of your sentiment about the recipient. Technique number 29. The exclusive smile. If you flash everybody the same smile like a Confederate dollar, it loses value. When meeting groups of people, grace each with a distinct smile. Let your smiles grow out of the beauty big players find in each new face. If one person in a group is more important to you than the others, reserve an especially big flooding smile just for him or her. In defense of the quickie. There are times, I discovered, when the quick put-on smile works. For example, when you want to engineer the acquaintance of someone to whom you have not had the opportunity to be introduced. In the vernacular, that's pick them up. The smile's pick-up power was proven for posterity by solemn researchers at the University of Missouri. They conducted a highly controlled study titled Giving Men the Come On, Effect of Eye Contact and Smiling in a Bar Environment. I kid you not. To prove their hypothesis, female researchers made eye contact with unsuspecting male subjects enjoying a little libation in a local drinking establishment. Sometimes the female researchers followed their glance with a smile. In other cases, no smile. The results? I quote the study. The highest approach behavior, 60%, was observed in the condition in which there was smiling. That translates into layman's English. The guy came over 60% of the time when the lady smiled. Without the smile, he made the approach only 20% of the time. So yes, a smile works for those who wish to pick somebody up. However, in situations where the stakes are higher, try the flooding smile from the first section, and now the exclusive smile. 30. How to avoid sounding like a jerk. Do you remember that scene from the movie classic Annie Hall, where Diane Keaton is first meeting Woody Allen? As she's chatting with him, we hear her private thoughts. She's musing to herself, "Oh, I hope he's not a jerk like all the others." One of the quickest ways to make a big winner think you are, well, a jerk, is to use a cliché. If you're chatting with a top communicator and even innocently remark, "Yes, I was tired as a dog," or "She was cute as a button," you've unknowingly laid a linguistic bomb. Big winners silently moan when they hear someone mouth a trite, overworn phrase. Oh sure, just like the rest of us, big winners find themselves feeling fit as a fiddle, happy as a lark, or high as a kite. Like the rest of humanity, they consider some of their acquaintances crazy as a loon, nutty as a fruitcake, or blind as a bat. Because many of them work hard, many of them are as busy as a bee, and get rich as Croesus. Yet would any of them describe themselves in those words? Not in a coon's age. Why? Because when a big winner hears your cliché, you might as well be saying, "My powers of imagination are impoverished. I can't think of anything original to say, so I must fall back on these trite, overworn phrases. Mouthing a common cliché around uncommonly successful people brands you as uncommonly common. Technique number 30. Don't touch a cliché with a 10-foot pole. Be on guard. Don't use any clichés when chatting with big winners. Don't even touch one with a 10-foot pole. Never? Not even when hell freezes over? Not unless you want to sound dumb as a doorknob. Instead of coughing up a cliché, roll your own clever phrases by using the next technique. 31. How to use motivational speakers' techniques to enhance your conversation. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. It is, but the tongue is even mightier than the pen. Our tongues can bring crowds to laughter, to tears, and often to their feet in shouting appreciation. Orators have moved nations to war or brought lost souls to God. And what is their equipment? The same eyes, ears, hands, legs, arms, and vocal cords you and I have. Perhaps a professional athlete has a stronger body, or a professional singer is blessed with a more beautiful singing voice than the one we were doled out. But the professional speaker starts out with the same equipment we all have. The difference is, these jawsmiths use it all. They use their hands, they use their bodies, and they use specific gestures with heavy impact. They think about the space they're talking in. They employ many different tones of voice. They invoke various expressions. They vary the speed with which they speak. And they make effective use of silence. You may not have to make a formal speech anytime soon, but chances are sometime, probably very soon, you're going to want people to see things your way. Whether it's persuading your family to spend their next vacation at Grandma's, or convincing the stockholders in your multi-million-dollar corporation that it's time to do a takeover, do it like a pro. Get a book or two on public speaking and learn some of the tricks of the trade. Then put some of that drama into your everyday conversation. A gem for every occasion. If stirring words help make your point, ponder the impact of powerful phrases. They've helped politicians get elected. Read my lips, no new taxes. And defendants get acquitted. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. If George H.W. Bush had said, I promise not to raise taxes, or Johnny Cochran during O.J. Simpson's criminal trial had said, if the glove doesn't fit, he must be innocent, their bulky sentences would have slipped in and out of the voters' or jurors' consciousness. As every politician and trial lawyer knows, neat phrases make powerful weapons. If you're not careful, your enemies will later use them against you. Read my lips. One of my favorite speakers is a radio broadcaster named Barry Farber, who brightens up late-night radio with sparkling similes. Barry would never use a cliché like, nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof. He described being nervous about losing his job as, I felt like an elephant dangling over a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy. Instead of saying he looked at a pretty woman, he'd say, my eyeballs popped out and dangled by the optic nerve. When I first met him, I asked, Mr. Farber, how do you come up with these phrases? My daddy's, Mr. Farber. I'm Barry, he chided, his way of saying, call me Barry. He then candidly admitted, although some of his phrases are original, many are borrowed. Elvis Presley used to say, "My daddy's Mr. Presley. Call me Elvis." Like all professional speakers, Barry spends several hours a week gleaning through books of quotations and humor. All professional speakers do. They collect bon mots they can use in a variety of situations, most especially to scrape egg off their faces when something unexpected happens. Many speakers use authors and speaker's agent Lily Walters's face-saver lines from her book, What to Say When You're Dying on the Platform. If you tell a joke and no one laughs, try, "That joke was designed to get a silent laugh, and it worked." If the microphone lets out an agonizing howl, look at it and say, "I don't understand. I brushed my teeth this morning." If someone asks you a question you don't want to answer, "Could you save that question until I'm finished and well on my way home?" All pros think of holes they might fall into and then memorize great escape lines. You can do the same. Look through books of similes to enrich your day-to-day conversations. Instead of happy as a lark, try happy as a lottery winner, or happy as a baby with its first ice cream cone. Instead of bald as an eagle, try bald as a new Marine, or bald as a bullfrog's belly. Instead of quiet as a mouse, try quiet as an eel swimming in oil, or quiet as a fly lighting on a feather duster. Find phrases that have visual impact. Instead of a cliché like sure as death and taxes, try as certain as beach traffic in July, or as sure as your shadow will follow you. Your listeners can't see death or taxes, but they sure can see beach traffic in July or their shadow following them down the street. Try to make your similes relate to the situation. If you're riding in a taxi with someone, as sure as that taxi meter will rise has immediate impact. If you're talking with a man walking his dog, as sure as your dog is thinking about that tree adds a touch of humor. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Humor enriches any conversation, but not jokes starting with, "Hey, did you hear the one about?" Plan your humor and make it relevant. For example, if you're going to a meeting on the budget, look up money in a quotation book. In an uptight business situation, a little levity shows you're at ease. Once, during an oppressive financial meeting, I heard a top executive say, "Don't worry, this company has enough money to stay in business for years, unless we pay our creditors." He broke the tension and won the appreciation of all. Later I saw a similar quote in a humor book attributed to Jackie Mason, the comedian. So what? The exec still came across as a cool communicator with his clever comment. Big players who want to be quoted in the media lie awake at night gnawing the pillow, trying to come up with phrases the press will pick up. A Michigan veterinarian named Timothy, a heavy hitter in his own field but completely unknown outside of it, made national headlines when he planned to attach a pair of feet to a rooster who lost his to frostbite. Why? Because he called it a drumstick transplant. I don't know if a French woman, Jeanne Calment, then officially the world's oldest person, was looking for publicity on her 122nd birthday. But she made international headlines when she told the media, "I've only ever had one wrinkle, and I'm sitting on it." Mark Victor Hansen, a big player in his own field but once relatively unknown outside of it, was propelled into national prominence when he came up with a catchy name for his book, co-authored with Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul. He told me his original title was 101 Pretty Stories. How far would that have gone? Soon the world was lapping up, among others, his Chicken Soup for the Woman's Soul, Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul, Chicken Soup for the Christian Soul, plus second, third, and fourth servings of chicken soup in hardcover, paperback, audio, video, and calendars. Technique number 31. Use Jaw Smith's jive. Whether you're standing behind a podium facing thousands or behind the barbecue grill facing your family, you'll move, amuse, and motivate with the same skills. Read speakers' books to cull quotations, pull pearls of wisdom, and get gems to tickle their funny bones. Find a few bon mots to let casually slide off your tongue on chosen occasions. If you want to be notable, dream up a crazy quotable. Make 'em rhyme, make 'em clever, or make 'em funny. Above all, make 'em relevant. A word of warning. No matter how good your material is, it bombs if it doesn't fit the situation. I learned this the hard way during my cruise ship days. On a cruise to England, I decided to give my passengers a reading of the English love poems of Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning. You know, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." It was a big hit. The passengers loved it and raved for days. I couldn't walk out on deck without some passenger turning to me and affectionately echoing, "How do I love thee?" Naturally, I got a pretty swollen head over this performance and fancied myself an eminent poetry reader. I decided to reward the passengers on the next cruise, which was a cruise to the Caribbean and didn't go anywhere in the neighborhood of England, with my spectacular reading of the English love poems. What a bomb! Passengers avoided me on the deck for the rest of the cruise. How did you bore me? Let me count the ways. 32. How to banter like the big shots do. Big winners tell it like it is. If you stepped into an elevator full of people speaking Hungarian, you might not recognize they were Hungarian unless you spoke their language. However, the minute you opened your mouth, they'd recognize you're not Hungarian. It's the same with the big cats. If you overhear several of them speaking, you might not recognize they're big cats. However, the minute you opened your mouth, they'd recognize you're not a big cat, unless you spoke their lingo. What are some differences between a big cat's growl and a little cat's insignificant hiss? One of the most blatant is euphemisms. Big cats aren't afraid of real words. They call a spade a spade. Words like toilet paper don't scare them. Little cats hide behind bathroom tissue. If somebody is rich, big cats call it rich. Little cats, oh so embarrassed at the concept of talking about money in polite company, substitute the word wealthy. When little cats use a substitute word or euphemism, they might as well be saying, "Whoops, you are better than I am. I'm in polite company now, and so I'll use the nicey nice word." Big cats are anatomically correct. No cutesy words for body parts. They'll say breasts when they mean breasts. When they say knockers, they mean decorative structures that hang on the front door. And family jewels are in the safe on the wall. If a big cat is ever in doubt about a word, he or she simply resorts to French. If they feel the word buttocks is debatable, Derriere will do quite nicely, thank you. Technique number 32. Call a spade a spade. Don't hide behind euphemisms. Call a spade a spade. That doesn't mean big cats use tasteless four-letter words when perfectly decent 5- and 6-letter ones exist. They've simply learned the King's English, and they speak it. Here's another way to tell the big players from the little ones just by listening to a few minutes of their conversation. 33. How to avoid the world's worst conversational habit. Once I was at a small dinner party given by the president of an advertising agency, Louis, and his wife, Lillian. The evening started with cocktails, followed by a gourmet meal accompanied by a selection of excellent wines. The conversation had been convivial, the cuisine delicious, and the wine very fine, and very plentiful. At the end of the evening, Louis raised his glass to make a toast. A few wine droplets sloshed out of his glass onto the tablecloth. A pretty young woman who was the date of a new art director named Bob giggled and said, "I can tell you're feeling no pain." Shock waves went around the table. Everyone froze. The host was indeed a bit inebriated. However, alluding to Louis being a little looped, even in jest, was as though the woman had suddenly smashed the crystal chandelier above the table with her dinner plate. One guest quickly covered the girl's horrifying gaffe by lifting her glass and saying, "None of us is. No one in the company of Louis and Lillian could ever feel any pain. Here's to a truly wonderful evening." Louis then continued with his toast to the wonderful company, and no one was feeling pain any longer, except Bob. He knew his date's innocent teasing was a black mark, if not in his personnel file, on his personal file. The next sure sign of a little cathood is teasing. Little cats go around patting their friends' paunches and saying, "Enjoying that cheesecake, huh?" Or looking at their balding heads and saying, "Hey, hair today, gone tomorrow, huh?" They think it's hilarious to make a quip at someone else's expense and say, "You don't have an inferiority complex. You are inferior. Hardy har har." Technique number 33. Trash the teasing. A dead giveaway of a little cat is his or her proclivity to tease. An innocent joke at someone else's expense may get you a cheap laugh. Nevertheless, the big cats will have the last one, because you'll bang your head against the glass ceiling they construct to keep little cats from stepping on their paws. Never, ever make a joke at anyone else's expense. You'll wind up paying for it dearly. 34. How to give them the bad news and have them like you all the more. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh treated the humblest message runner like a prince when he arrived at the palace, if he brought good news. However, if the exhausted runner had the misfortune to bring the pharaoh unhappy news, his head was chopped off. Shades of that spirit pervade today's conversations. Once a friend and I packed up some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for an outing. As we waltzed happily out the door, picnic basket in hand, a smiling neighbor, rocking away on his porch, looked up at the sky and said, "Oh boy, bad day for a picnic. The newscast says it's gonna rain." I wanted to rub his face in my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Not for his gloomy weather report, for his smile. Several months ago I was racing to catch a bus. As I breathlessly shoved my handful of cash across the Greyhound counter, The grinning sales agent gushed, "Oh, that bus left 5 minutes ago." Dreams of decapitation. It's not the news that makes someone angry. It's the unsympathetic attitude with which it's delivered. Everyone must give bad news from time to time, and winning professionals do it with the proper attitude. A doctor advising a patient she needs an operation does it with compassion. A boss informing an employee he didn't get the job takes on a sympathetic demeanor. Grief counselors at airports after fatal crashes share the grief-stricken sentiment of relatives. Big winners know, when delivering any bad news, they should share the sentiment of the receiver. Unfortunately, many people are not aware of this sensitivity. When you're weary from a long flight, has a hotel clerk cheerfully chirped that your room isn't ready yet? When you had your heart set on the roast beef, has your waiter merrily warbled that he just served the last piece? When you needed cash for the weekend, has your bank teller gleefully told you your account is overdrawn? It makes you, as a traveler, diner, or depositor, want to put your fist right through their insensitive grins. Had my neighbor told me of the impending rainstorm with sympathy, I would have appreciated his warning. Had the Greyhound sales clerk sympathetically informed me that my bus had already left, I probably would have said, "Oh, that's all right. I'll catch the next one." Big winners, when they bear bad news, deliver bombs with the emotion the bombarded person is sure to have. Technique number 34. It's the receiver's ball. A football player wouldn't last 2 beats of the time clock if he made blind passes. A pro throws the ball with the receiver always in mind. Before throwing out any news, keep your receiver in mind. Then deliver it with a smile, a sigh, or a sob. Not according to how you feel about the news, but how the receiver will take it. Big winners know how to give bad news to people. They also know how to give any news to anyone, even when people are pressuring them. Let's explore that next. 35. How to respond when you don't want to answer and wish they'd shut the heck up. One of my clients, Barbara, a mini-star in the furniture business, recently separated from her husband and business partner Frank, a megastar in the furniture business. They suffered a long and messy divorce that resulted in them keeping the business jointly but not having to deal with each other. Soon after the divorce, I was at an industry convention with Barbara. Since she and Frank were both beloved in the industry, people were curious about what had happened and how it affected their company. But of course, no one dared ask outright, and Barbara was offering no explanations. I was seated next to Barbara at the gala farewell dinner. Apparently one of her colleagues at the table couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. During dessert, she leaned over to Barbara and in a hushed voice asked, "Barbara, what happened with you and Frank?" Barbara, unruffled by the rude question, simply took a spoonful of her cherries Jubilee and said, "We've separated, but the company is unaffected." Not satisfied with that answer, the woman pumped harder. "Are you still working together?" Barbara took another bite of her dessert and repeated in precisely the same tone of voice, "We've separated, but the company is unaffected." The frustrated interrogator was not going to give up easily. "Are you both still working in the company?" Barbara, appearing not the least disturbed by the woman's incontinent insistence, scooped the last cherry out of her dish, smiled, looked directly at her, and said in the identical tone of voice, "We've separated, but the company is unaffected." That shut her up. Barbara had shown her big winner's badge by using the broken record technique, the most effective way to curtail an unwelcome cross-examination. Technique number 35. The broken record. Whenever someone persists in questioning you on an unwelcome subject, simply repeat your original response. Use precisely the same words in precisely the same tone of voice. Hearing it again usually quiets them down. If your rude interrogator hangs on like a leech, your next repetition never fails to flick them off. 36. How to talk to a celebrity. Suppose you've just settled in for dinner at a nice restaurant. You look over at the next table, and who do you see? Is it really he? Could it possibly be? It's got to be a look-alike. No, it isn't. It really is Woody Allen. Substitute any celebrity here. Your favorite movie star, politician, broadcaster, boss who owns the company that owns the company you work for. And there the celestial body is in the flesh, sitting not 10 feet from you. What should you do? Nothing. Big shots don't slobber over stars. Let the luminary enjoy a brief moment of anonymity. If he or she should cast a glance in your direction, give a smile and a nod. Then waft your gaze back to your dining companion. You will be a lot cooler in the eyes of your dinner partner if you take it all in your stride. Now, if you just can't resist this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to press the flesh of the megastar and tell him or her of your admiration, here's how to do it with grace. Wait until you or the luminary are leaving the restaurant. After the check has been paid, and you will obviously not be taking much of his or her time, you may make your approach. Say something like, "Mr. Allen, I just want to tell you how much pleasure your wonderful films have given me over the years. Thank you so much." Did you pick up the subtlety here? You are not complimenting his work. After all, he might well ask himself, who are you to judge whether I am a great filmmaker or not? You can only speak from your own perspective. You do this by telling him how much pleasure his work has given you. If it's your boss's 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 boss, whom the fates have sent to bask in your adulation, do the same. Do not say, "Bill," or "Mr. Gates, you really run a great company." Lowly geek, he thinks. Who are you to judge? Instead, tell him what an honor it is to work for him. Obviously, this is not the moment to detail the intricacies of your improvements on image editing software for digitizing photographs. Then let your body language express that if Woody or Bill or the other megastar wants to leave it at that, you are happy with the exchange. If, however, the megastar is captivated by you, or has had so much liquid merriment that he or she has decided to mingle with the masses tonight, then all bets are off. You're on your own. Enjoy. Until you pick up the first body language sign that they would like to end it. Think of yourself as a ballroom dance student waltzing with your teacher. He leads, you follow, and he tells you when the waltz is over. Incidentally, if the megastar is with a companion and your conversation goes on for more than a few moments, direct some comments at the companion. If the satellite is in such stellar company, he or she is probably also an accomplished person. Felicia, a friend of mine, is a talented trial lawyer who is married to a local TV show host. Because Tom is on television, people recognize him wherever they go, and Felicia gets ignored. Felicia tells me how frustrating it is even for Tom. Whenever they go to a party, people gush all over Tom, and Felicia's fascinating work hardly ever gets mentioned. She and Tom used to love going out to dinner, but now they hide out at home in the evenings. Why? Because they can't stand the interruptions of overly effervescent fans. I love what you used to be, you has-been. Another sensitivity. The film star is probably obsessed with his last film, the politician with her last election, a corporate mogul with his last takeover, an author with her last novel, and so forth. So when discussing the stars, the politicians, the moguls, the authors, or any VIP's work, try to keep your comments to current or recent work. Telling Woody Allen how much you loved his 1980 film Stardust Memories would not endear you to him. What about all my wonderful films since? Thinks he. Stick to the present or very recent past if possible. Technique number 36. Big shots don't slobber. People who are VIPs in their own right don't slobber over celebrities. When you are chatting with one, don't compliment her work. Simply say how much pleasure or insight it's given you. If you do single out any one of the star's accomplishments, make sure it's a recent one, not a memory that's getting yellow in her scrapbook. If the queen bee has a drone sitting with her, find a way to involve him in the conversation. A final celebrity codicil. Suppose you are fortunate enough to have one at your party. To shine some starlight on your party, don't ask the TV host to say a few words. Don't ask the singer to sing a song. What looks effortless to the rest of us because they seem so comfortable performing is work for them. You wouldn't ask an accountant guest to look over your books, or a dentist to check out your third left molar. Let the dignitary drink. Let the luminary laugh. Celebrities are people too, and they like their time off. 37. How to make them want to thank you. To wrap up our section on sounding like the big boys and big girls, here is a simple and gracious little maneuver. It not only signals people you're a top communicator, but it encourages them to keep doing nice things for you, or complimenting you, or doing business with you, or loving you. It is very short. It is very sweet. It is very simple. You can use it with everyone in your life. When it becomes instinctive, you'll find yourself using it every day. Very simply, never let the phrase "thank you" stand naked and alone. Always make it thank you for something. People use the bare exposed thank you so often that people don't even hear it anymore. When we buy the morning newspaper, we flash a naked thank you at the vendor when he gives us our nickels change. Is that the same thank you you want to give a valued customer who makes a big purchase in your store? Or a loved one who cooks you a delicious dinner? Whenever the occasion warrants more than an unconscious acknowledgement, dress up your thank you with the reason. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being so understanding. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for being such a good customer. thank you for being so loving. Often when I disembark an airplane, the captain and first officer are standing by the cockpit door to bid the passengers farewell. I say, "Thanks for getting us here." Admittedly, that's carrying never the naked thank you technique to extremes, but it has a surprising effect. They fall all over themselves with, "Oh, thanks for flying with us." Technique number 37. Never the naked thank you. Never let the phrase thank you stand alone. From A to Z, always follow it with for. From thank you for asking to thank you for zipping me up. Thank you for listening to this section of How to Talk to Anyone. Now let us move on to another conversation challenge. How to talk knowledgeably with everyone, from groups of accountants to Zen Buddhists, no matter how little you might have in common. Part 4. How to be an insider in any crowd. What are they all talking about? Has it ever happened to you? Everyone at the party is speaking gobbledygook. They're all discussing faulty audits, code constraints, or the library market, and you have no idea what they're talking about. It's because everybody at the party is an accountant, an architect, or a publisher, and you're not. So you stand there with a pasty smile on your face, not opening your mouth. If you do, you fear the wrong thing will come out. Paranoia sets in. Everybody will snicker at you. You're an outsider, so you suffer in silence. In high school, I suffered a massive case of silent outsider syndrome, especially around males. All they wanted to talk about was cars. I knew nothing about cars. The only time I'd ever set foot in a body shop was to get a suntan. Well, one fateful day, Mama came home with a gift for me that transformed my teenage existence from shy to sociable. It was a book on all the current model cars and their differences over and under the hood. One reading, and I became fluent in Fords, Chevys, and Buicks. I no longer hyperventilated when boys said words like carburetor, alternator, camshaft, or exhaust manifold. I didn't need to learn a lot, just enough to ask the right questions to get the guys talking. When I'd learned to speak car with the boys, it worked wonders for my social life. Cut to today. We grown-up boys and girls also have our favorite topics that usually involve our work or our hobbies. When we're with people in our own field or who share our interests, we open up like small-town gossips. Even engineers who have a constant case of cat-got-their-tongue start gabbing about greasy turbines and various projects when they're together. To outsiders, our conversation sounds like gobbledygook. But we know precisely what it's about. It's our own jobbledygook or hobbidygook. You fear you'll find yourself in a party of squash players when you're the type of person who'd rather be in court than on court? Don't panic hearing words like lobbing and hitting rails roll off the squash players' tongues. So what if the only experience you've ever had with squash was the mashed acorn variety on your plate next to the turkey last Thanksgiving? All you need is the few techniques that follow. Just as anglers throw out a dragonfly to get the fish to bite, all you have to do is throw out the right questions to get people to open up. Dale Carnegie's adage, "Show sincere interest and people will talk," only goes so far. As they say in poker, It takes jacks or better to open. And in conversation, it takes cursory knowledge or better about their field to get them to really open up. You must have knowledgeable curiosity, the kind that makes you sound like you're worth talking to. In this section, we explore techniques that are open sesames to get people gabbing with you like an insider. 38. How to be a modern-day Renaissance man or woman. Whenever friends visit my hometown, New York City, I warn them, never ask anyone riding in the subway for directions. Because I'll get mugged? They fearfully ask. No, just because you'll never get where you're going. Most Big Apple subway riders know only two things about the subway: where they get on and where they get off. They know nothing about the rest of the system. Most people are like NYC strap hangers when it comes to their hobbies and interests. They know their own pastimes, but all the others are like unvisited stations. My unmarried, and wishing she weren't, friend Rita has a bad case of bowler's thumb. Every Wednesday night she's bowling up a storm with her friends. She is forever discussing her scores, her averages, and her high game. Another single and searching friend, Walter, is into whitewater rafting. He talks endlessly with his paddling friends about which rivers he's run, which outfitters he's gone with, and which class rapids he prefers. Thinking my two single friends might hit it off, I introduced Walter the paddler to Rita the bowler and mentioned their respective passions. "Oh, you're a bowler," said Walter. "Yes." Rita smiled demurely, awaiting more questions about her big bowling turn-on. Walter was silent. Masking her disappointment, Rita said, Leo tells me you're into water rafting." Walter smiled proudly, awaiting further friendly interrogation on paddling. That must be exciting. Isn't it dangerous?" was the best Rita could do. "No, it's not dangerous," Walter patronizingly responded to her typical outsider's question. Then the conversation died. During the deafening silence, I remember thinking, if Rita had run just one river, if Walter had bowled just one game, their lives might be different now. Conversation could have flowed, and who knows what else might have flowered. Go fly a kite. The scramble therapy technique is salvation from such disappointing encounters. It will transform you into a modern-day Renaissance man or woman who comfortably can discuss a variety of interests. Scramble therapy is, quite simply, scrambling up your life and participating in an activity you'd never think of indulging in. Just one out of every 4 weekends, do something totally out of your pattern. Do you usually play tennis on weekends? This weekend, go hiking. Do you usually go hiking? This weekend, take a tennis lesson. Do you bowl? Leave that to your buddies this time. Instead, go whitewater rafting. Oh, you were planning on running some rapids like you do every warm weekend? Forget it. Go bowling. Go to a stamp exhibition. Go to a chess lecture. Go ballooning. Go bird watching. Go to a pool hall. Go kayaking. Go fly a kite. Why? Because it will give you conversational fodder for the rest of your life. From that weekend on, you'll sound like an insider with all the hikers, stamp collectors, ballooners, birders, billiards players, kayakers, and kitists you ever meet, just by doing their activity once. If you take a piece of blue litmus paper and dip it in a huge vat of acid, the tip turns pink. If you take another blue litmus paper and dip it into just one minuscule drop of acid on a glass slide, the tip turns just as pink. Compare this to participating in an activity just one time. A sampling gives you 80% of the conversational value. You learn the insider's questions to ask. You start using the right terms. You'll never be at a loss again when the subject of extracurricular interests comes up, which it always does. Do you speak scuba? I'm not a certified scuba diver. However, 6 years ago in Bermuda, I saw a sign. Resort dives, $25. No scuba experience necessary. In just 3 hours, I received the best crash course in talking with scuba divers the world offers. First, I was given a quick lesson in the pool. Then, struggling to stay erect under the weight of my oxygen tank, regulator, buoyancy compensator, and weight belt, I went clumping out to the dive boat. Sitting there on the rocking dinghy, fondling my mask and fins like worry beads, I overheard the certified divers asking each other insider questions. Where were you certified? Where have you dived? Do you prefer wrecks or reefs? Ever done any night diving? Are you into underwater photography? Do you dive on a computer? What's your longest bottom time? Did you ever get the bends? This is scuba lingo. I now speak scuba. To this day, whenever I meet divers, I have the right questions to ask and subjects to discuss, and the right ones to avoid. Like how much I like seafood. That's like telling a cat lover how much you love tender barbecued kitten. I can now ask my new friends which of the scuba hotspots they've been to. Cozumel, Cayman, Cancun. Then, if I want to really show off, I ask if they've been to Truk Lagoon in the far Pacific, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, or the Red Sea. All the insider terms now roll comfortably off my tongue. Before my scramble therapy experience, I'd be calling their beloved wrecks and reefs sunken ships and coral. Understandable words, but not scuba words, not insider words. Upon meeting a scuba diver, I probably would have asked, "Oh, scuba diving. That must be interesting. Aren't you afraid of sharks?" Not a good way to get off on the right fin with a diver. Think about it. Suppose at a dinner party the table conversation turns to scuba diving. If you two had done your one-time-only dive, you'd ask your diving dinner companion if he likes night diving or whether he prefers diving on wrecks or reefs. He'll never believe it when you tell him the deepest water you've ever submerged yourself in is your own bathtub. Then you turn to the bungee jumper seated on your left and ask him, "Do you prefer chest-waist jumps or ankle jumps?" If the conversation then changes to tennis, or martial arts, or chess, or coin collecting, or even bird watching, you can keep up and keep the conversation going. What a guy! What a gal! Technique number 38. Scramble therapy. Once a month, scramble your life. Do something you'd never dream of doing. Participate in a sport. Go to an exhibition. Hear a lecture on something totally out of your experience. You get 80% of the right lingo and insider questions from just one exposure.